Today's World Insight. 11th hour Trump administration policy change on Taiwan, with hurdles to official contact to the island taken down. How will the Biden administration pick up where Trump left off? And chaotic transition of power in the U.S. What does it mean for the rest of the world? Answers from Kishore Mahbubani, a Singaporean diplomat and scholar.
And this is, of course, the saddest reality of the United States.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. As the clock runs out on the Trump administration, China-U.S. ties hit another hot-button issue, Taiwan. Secretary of State from the U.S. Mike Pompeo said he was lifting restrictions on official diplomatic contacts with Taiwan. Previously, any U.S. administration would be expected to follow the contact guidelines regarding relations with Taiwan. Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Kelly Craft, will visit the region from Wednesday to Friday. Beijing reiterated its opposition to any form of official exchange between the U.S. and Taiwan, asking the U.S. to stick to the One China policy. While the Trump administration ramped up backing for Taiwan over the years with more arms sales and even visits by officials, what can we expect from the incoming Biden administration toward the issue of Taiwan? Let's loop in our panelists. For more on the Taiwan latest situation, joining us in Taipei, Joanna Lei, former legislator. In Beijing, Teng Jianqun, director of the Center for Arms Control and International Security Studies with China Institute of International Studies. Last but not least, in Los Angeles, Jonathan Pollack, non-resident senior fellow in the Center for East Asia Policy Studies, and John Thornton China Center at the Brookings Institution. Gentlemen and lady, welcome to the program. Ms. Lei, let me start by asking, what's your response to all the latest series of rhetorics and actions from Washington toward Taipei?
Well, certainly on the surface, these are very positive and friendly gestures. However, this is at the bottom of the ninth innings. It's a little bit too little too late, given that the president may not have time to fully execute his new support and new commitments to enhance Taiwan and U.S. relationship. And it is also a reason for caution because people are concerned about these actions tipping the balance across Taiwan Strait. And if that were the case, that may not be the best for Taiwan as well. So there are a lot of words of caution, but amidst some welcoming voices.
So, Mr. Pollack, given what is happening with Washington politics, how do you see the nature of the latest rhetorics and actions coming from the current administration, who has less than 10 days to go?
This is the culmination of a long-term effort, in particular by Secretary of State Pompeo, to create as much damage and uncertainty and change in the U.S.-China relationship as possible. It's been in a number of dimensions, but these latest actions represent a culmination of that process because Mr. Pompeo is running out of time. What he hopes to do, and again, I'm not defending it, I'm just simply saying what he hopes to do, is to make the relationship as unsettled as possible as the Biden administration takes power. He also thinks it will benefit his own political ambitions if he were to run for president in another 4 years from now.
Even though we have heard already from the other two speakers that it seems that that decision being made and the latest rhetorics and actions all have their political purposes, and there are cautious receptions in Taiwan also about them. Mr. Teng, this is a test for China?
I think more and more provocative actions or words from the current U.S. administration will enhance the determination for the Chinese government or for our military to use force against the tendency of separation in this area. I mean, both in Taiwan and also the support from the United States in this regard.
Ms. Lei, now the UN ambassador of the United States is to visit Taiwan. We do not know what kind of messages she would be there to deliver. But one thing is for sure, it is up to Taiwan right now to decide what is the level of reception, what messages to be delivered then, and also how to control the damage once it's done. Ms. Lei, what's your assessment of some of the possibilities from Taiwan?
It is also important to know that she will be the outgoing ambassador to the United Nations.
That's right.
Therefore, when she comes this way, I believe that the government is ready to host her as a goodwill ambassador. There might be hidden messages by either President Trump or Pompeo, and some even speculated that there could be very bold moves in terms of moving the official relationship further. However, I believe that Tsai Ing-wen will also wage this very carefully. It is customary that a person of her stature, when they visit Taiwan, like in the last time someone paid us a visit to Ma Ying-jeou hosted the last visitor, and Tsai Ing-wen will definitely host Kelly. However, we do believe that there can be room for us to discuss the people-to-people exchanges, goodwill gestures, and then promote humanities, climate change, and all sorts of issues that Tsai Ing-wen touted for Taiwan to be U.S. value partners. However, if they do move further into challenging the current status of the One China policy, I believe even with the current DPP government, they will be very careful in following the lead by President Trump and Pompeo.
Mr. Tang, now it's quite clear that the status quo of the relations across the Taiwan Strait cannot be changed. However, and China is very determined about that. However, there might be many steps taken by this administration in the U.S. and also Taiwan authorities to push Taiwan more into international organizations, giving Taiwan more status than what China believes should have as part of its own territory. So, Mr. Tang, how do you see the possibility of this layer?
Yeah, you're right. I think the coming president, Joe Biden, will attach great importance to the so-called international space for Taiwan, because the Democratic Party or the Democratic leaders will give some importance to the space of Taiwan to international organizations and to some other mechanism in the world. I think this is the tradition for Democratic Party, and Joe Biden will use this philosophy to deal with the so-called challenge from China as a strategic competitor. And it's compared with the current president, Donald Trump. He would like to go directly, but Joe Biden will go in an indirect way, that is to mobilize support from the airlines, including the support from Japan, from Australia, and from other countries to deal with the so-called challenge from the Chinese side. So I think in the coming years, China might face new, challenges in this regard.
A Biden administration official has been talking about during the transition on the relation with Taiwan. The Biden administration will continue to support, quote, a peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues consistent with the wishes and best interests of the people of Taiwan, end of quote. Does the Biden administration, do you think, would desire a card like Taiwan to be played with China?
It seems to me that what Biden hopes to be able to achieve with China is he does not want to see this continuing decline, severe deterioration in the relationship, the stakes are too high, and to that extent, how he treats the announced changes that Pompeo has just announced, how he deals with them will be an important indication of the kind of dialogue that he hopes, I believe, to start with Beijing. I don't think that, for one, that Biden is looking to cause real trouble, real turbulence. Quite the contrary. He really is someone with many of the people that he has appointed who are very familiar with these issues to try to steady the ship, we might say, rather than rock the boat. So in that sense, I think there's an opportunity, but very frankly, it has to be something that's done in conjunction with the government in Beijing. I think both sides recognize that this is a relationship that has undergone enormous stress over the last 4 years. It's a very changed relationship. I don't think that either side somehow thinks that everything can be magically restored to what it was before.
The reason why the outgoing administration is trying to play this card of Taiwan for the last week when it's in office, it's because, for the one thing, want to set probably a difficult situation for the Biden administration, but on the other hand, also try to make its own legacy to a certain extent. And as a result of that, they know China will react. China will have to react for provocative actions and rhetorics. To what extent, we'll have to see. But after China reacts, there would be certainly the escalation of tensions across the Taiwan Straits. Some could be manageable, some might not necessarily for the long term. So, Mr. Pollack, now, how will the incoming administration be able to deal with an escalated, intense situation across the Taiwan Straits? Do you think they are prepared for this? If not, how are they going to de-escalate the situation if things are getting ever more intense as a result of the latest visit?
Now, in this respect, even as Pompeo has tried to lay out his legacy, it may not be that that anyone in the Biden administration feels obligated to uphold it. We don't know exactly how they will react, but the very fact that something has been laid down and it was not, so far as I know, the subject of careful planning and consideration within the bureaucracy, was even criticized at other levels in the State Department, suggests to me that there is room here to distance the incoming administration from what Pompeo may have thought he could force them to do. In other words, the incoming administration will be in a position to decide in what areas and in what ways does it adjust or not adjust policies towards Taiwan. They are not obligated in that sense to follow exactly what Pompeo did, which has some internal contradictions in it in any event. So that's why I believe that the Chinese side has to weigh very, very carefully whether it comes in too strongly at first, or whether it sees, not only with respect to Taiwan policy, but in other areas as well, that the U.S. and China can establish or reestablish a more maturing relationship where you, rather than heighten tensions, you're looking for ways to manage them and avoid the potential risks that they might imply. I think there's a realism that will be evident in their words and at least as important or more important in their actions.
The Chinese and U.S. militaries were in close contact despite the other sides of the relations between the two sides were deteriorating to quite a low level over the past few years. They were in discussion for crisis management. Now, we haven't heard much about the result though, but certainly the issue of Taiwan will be one that is likely to require a lot of crisis management skills from both the militaries and to also the political leaders as well. So, Mr. Tang, to what extent do you think both sides are ready? To what extent do you think the structure is there to deal with, not only rhetorical issues, but also a real crisis if it really became one?
Yeah, I think in recent, at least in recent 1 year, we have witnessed the preparation of the PRA. The PRA, waged several large-scale exercises related to the situation in Taiwan. And on the other side, I'm sure when President Biden comes into the office of the White House, I'm sure the security dialogue will be resumed between the two countries, including the military-to-military exchanges. But in Trump's administration, I think, at least in recent 3 years, there were no, any context between the two sides or exchanges between the two sides in talking about the crisis management. So while we are a little bit relaxed at this moment, I think we are facing such an opportunity that the dialogue or the exchanges between the two sides, especially the two militaries, will be on the traditional track, that we could have some dialogue at this moment.
All right. Before we go, Ms. Lei, final question for you as well. How do you see the preparedness that the mainland has been doing toward the question of Taiwan, peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait? Given the geopolitics that we are seeing today, what do you consider as the best way out from your perspective?
Well, the mainland China has made its intention of aerial denial clear to both Taiwan and to the United States through recent military exercises. So it is very clear that if there's any tipping of the balance across Taiwan Strait, mainland China is fully prepared to take on the challenges head on. Therefore, it is important for us to expect all the leaders to exercise restraint. And it is an opportunity to reset the relationship across Taiwan Strait as well as with the United States. Like Mr. Pollack said, President Biden has used a lot of old hands who are seasoned players, known quantity, who understands how to deal with delicate issues across the Taiwan Strait. So we're hoping for an era to reset so that the United States and PRC would go back to a more restrained relationship and not open provocation or hostility, as well as creating tension between Taiwan and PRC. We certainly hope that with the reset, there will be a new equilibrium brought back by new leaders in the United States so that we can all enjoy a relative peace and stability.
On that note, I would like to thank the three of you joining us. Thank you so much, Joanna Lei, Teng Jianxun, and Jonathan Pollack. Really appreciate it. There's only one China in the world, and Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory. While it's inevitable for the great rejuvenation of the Chinese people, the issue of Taiwan has always been the bottom line for ties with the United States. With increasingly complex geopolitics in the Asia-Pacific region, how to deal with uncertainties of the Taiwan issue in the new year. For more answers, earlier I had a chance to talk to Yang Mingjie, the director of the Institute for Taiwan Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Let's listen in. Professor Yang, welcome to CGTN. A lot of the experts I've been talking to have been reflecting about how turbulent a year it has been, but many suggest the coming year might not be better. Professor Yang, from your perspective, doing research on cross-strait relations and the Taiwan issue, what is your assessment?
For me, I think there are two paths for Taiwan issues. One may be negative. That is, as you mentioned, about the turbulence, and there are a lot of troubles. And we don't hope there will be another good year for us across Taiwan Straits, because Taiwan wants to join with the United States on the framework of Indo-Pacific strategy. and want to enhance the tensions across Taiwan Straits. But on the other side, I think it's not offset, but I think it's a normal side. That means we have established a stabilities across Taiwan Straits, not only on the economic communication, but also on the people-to-people communication and social communication. That is much more stable than the last decades. So that's why even during the Trump administration, even there's some challenge for the cross-strait issues, but the basement for the Taiwan Straits never really changed.
Let's talk about the nearest term, the change of administration inside the United States. Earlier, we see the Trump administration played with the Taiwan card a lot. Now, during this transition between two administrations, do you see much danger?
Some danger, but not so dangerous. Danger is that I don't think the next president of the United States don't want to give up the Taiwan cards. But I'm not so, worry about the dangers is that because according to some statement or some maybe arguments from the national security team of the new president, they want to focus the Taiwan Strait issues on the so-called ambiguous policy. They don't want to touch the red line or the bottom line. They want to make some constraint about the policy. That maybe gives some rooms for mainland China and the United States to deal with that issues.
So you think it could be better, quote unquote?
Not so better, but I think maybe some kind of stable and not so challenging.
However, it is hard to avoid incidents and accidents. So how much do you think China is prepared? Would there be much misunderstanding during the most sensitive period of time?
For me, I think also there's no the so-called official or formal channels between mainland China and the United States on Taiwan issues so far. But we have some dialogue and communications channels. Even so, there are some potential and risk or crisis in the future or accident. But I think the two sides want to find a crisis management channel.
What is that channel? And what is some of the mechanism you just mentioned?
For example, even there's a tension, as I said, is increasing at the end, by the end of the President Trump administration. But the two military units have some special channels. They exchange their information. They want to make some mutual visit.
But that's the last resort, actually, the military ties.
Yes. They want to, according to some the code of conduct, how to avoid in the air or in the sea, the accident crash of the Navy or the Air Force.
Among the Biden administration, some of the key posts, actually many of the figures you are familiar with. In other words, you even had dialogues and discussions, conversations with them when they were serving in other capacities during the earlier administrations. So, Professor Yang, what is your judgment of their perspective of the Taiwan issue? Do you see the circumstances change, that attitudes and basic assessment from the other side might also evolve in a dramatic way?
Maybe some changes that the new administration, also some people come from the so-called old administration of Democratic Party, but they have some new ideas. They want to make the competition and the cooperation with China. So what the meaning of the competition means for Taiwan issues? It's not only mean that they want to bargain with China on Taiwan issues, but I think they want to keep a new balance across Taiwan Straits, not only on military issues, but also maybe some social and economic level. That's a challenge for us.
Interesting. What do you mean? How are you going to face up to that challenge, in other words?
For example, maybe they want to invite Taiwan in the so-called non-China supply chain, something like that. Maybe they want to invite Taiwan to take part in some forum and some, not alliance, but a forum or some communications platform of values.
And what is China going to do? Are we going to play the bigness?
I think that we have sent very clear signals to the United States and also to Taiwan that we want to keep the stability across Taiwan Straits. if they want to make some new challenge, we will make some new response for that. That is not only by military means, but also by law enforcement, economic issues, and also some others.
You're watching World Insight, still to come on the program. Chaotic transition of power in the U.S. What does it mean for the rest of the world? We speak to Kishore Mahbubani, a Singaporean diplomat and a well-known scholar, right after the break.
And this is, of course, the saddest reality.
Welcome back. This is World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Next, let's take a look at the chaotic transition of power in the U.S. Last week, rioting in the Capitol building left many questioning the strength of democracy, at least the U.S. version. President Donald Trump has now pledged an orderly transfer of power, but one can hardly find any order in his legacy. Throughout his term, many believe Trump has been intent on reshaping American government and refocusing its foreign policy in an unprecedented manner, together with members of his administration. With just 8 days until President-elect Joe Biden is sworn in, the whole world is watching which direction the U.S. goes next. What does the uncertain process mean for the rest of the world? For answers, I talked to Mr. Kishore Mahbubani, Distinguished Fellow from the Asia Research Institute of National University of Singapore. Mr. Mahbubani was Singapore's former permanent representative to the United Nations and has served as president of the UN Security Council between 2001 to 2002. His recent book, Has China Won?, states that geopolitical context of the 21st century is between China and the U.S. Is it true? Take a listen under the current circumstances. Professor, what a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
So many things going on in the U.S. over the past week. What is your take of all happened so far?
Well, I would say it would be a huge mistake to try and pass judgment so quickly on what has happened last Wednesday in Washington, D.C., because when the history of the United States is written, and the United States is not a very old country, so less than 250 years old, certainly that date, last Wednesday, will be recorded as one of the most significant dates in American history. Because never before in American history have you had a situation where a sitting president tries to use a mob to overturn a decision made by the people of America and a decision that was about to be confirmed by the Congress of America. So what happened clearly on last Wednesday was very, very shocking. And it will take some time for us to absorb the real significance of that event and also to understand the structural causes that caused this event.
What do you consider as some of the most important issues that you would love to know better about and analyze more about? As you said, we are not doing any conclusion right here, but certainly we could do some quite educated, quote unquote, guesses and analysis. So tell me more about some of the important points that you are watching very closely about how things are evolving now.
Well, I would say that there are a couple of deep structural causes, because what's happening in the United States is because it's such a polarized country now, such a divided country. So if you read the liberal media, all they do is blame Trump. But you cannot just blame Trump alone, because at the end of the day, in November, over 74 million Americans voted for Trump. So you got to understand, why did 74 million Americans voted for Trump? And that is the most fundamental issue that needs to be addressed. And I believe the structural causes behind the unhappiness in America, firstly, and this is what I document in my book, Has China Won?, the United States of America has become a plutocracy. Now, what's the difference between a plutocracy and a democracy? A democracy is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So in democracy, you have a government that takes care of the largest number of people. In a plutocracy, you have a government that just takes care of the top 1%. And this is, of course, the saddest reality of the United States, which many Americans are in denial about, which is that the American political system has been hijacked by the very wealthy. And as a consequence of that, the bottom 50%, and this is statistically confirmed, by the way, the bottom 50% haven't seen their average income or living standards improve over a 30-year period. And that's why there's so much unhappiness among the white working classes, because they haven't seen their livelihoods improve at all, while the wealthy in America are getting richer and richer. But that's only one side of the problem. That's the economic side of the problem. But there's also a cultural side of the problem, which is that, again, the white working classes felt a sense of ownership of the United States of America. And now they increasingly feel, as they're becoming numerically, in a sense, not a majority anymore, but a plurality, they feel that they're losing control of their country. So if you watch the people, if you had seen the television scenes, and I watched the television scenes carefully, the entire mob was white working classes, white middle classes. There were no blacks, there were no Asians in that group participating in that. And that's also a cultural issue, where the white working classes feel, hey, we're no longer in control of our country. So that's why they went to Congress. They say, I'm going to take back my government. So these are very deep structural issues that have to be understood in depth before you can understand what happened last Wednesday in the United States of America.
Professor Mahbubani, and therefore one would ask whether the system that the U.S. is having right now will be able to address some of those systemic problems that you just said. In that sense, are you confident?
The United States has bounced back very strongly from different crises. You remember when Jimmy Carter was president and he spoke about the malaise that was hitting America. There was tremendous pessimism about the future of America. And then you notice how strongly America bounced back in the 1980s after that malaise of the 1970s. So America goes through these cycles, and it is therefore conceivable that it can turn around, but it'll be difficult. I must emphasize this, because of if you look at all the crises that the United States has gone through from the past 250 years, I would say this is bad. This is as bad as the American Civil War of the 1860s, and you can see that this is about as divided as America has been since the American Civil War, because there is no dialogue, no middle ground between the two sides, and this will be clearly Joe Biden's biggest challenge. I mean, he's becoming president of America at one of the most difficult moments in American history. And therefore, it would be wiser for him to focus on domestic challenges.
So, Professor Mahbubani, what does it mean for all of us? Because what we are doing right now is to analyze the United States from outside, right? As you said, it's now our country, and we could expect different circumstances and possibilities to happen at any moment. But what does it mean for the others who want to still minimize the unpredictability level, who also want to minimize the danger that one country, one culture, and the global trade, that the global pandemic is facing right now? What does it mean to all of us, Professor Mahbubani, watching what's happening?
I would say, when you speak of all of us, I would certainly make a distinction between China and the rest of the world, because as you know, there is a strong bipartisan consensus in the United States body politic that the time has come for the U.S. to stand up to China. And there is, as you know, the U.S.-China geopolitical contest has begun, and that's what my book, Has China Won, is about. But at the same time, I would say, I'm told the Chinese word for crisis is a combination of two characters, danger and opportunity. I hope that's correct. The danger for China is very clear, because for China, if the country is angry and people want to distract attention from domestic issues, they will try to use China as a distraction, and that's a danger that's real. And you saw, I was very stunned by Mike Pompeo's rather, I must say, erratic decision to lift all restrictions on dealings with Taiwan. That's exactly the wrong thing to do at a time when your country is in trouble. But that's an example of how things can go wrong if angry people are looking for a scapegoat. But at the same time, there's also an opportunity for China today, and I want to emphasize that, because if President Joe Biden decides that his main priority should be to take care of the well-being of the American people, and the best way for America to take care of the well-being of the American people is to cooperate with other countries, with all the countries in the world, including with China. Because clearly the Chinese market is becoming bigger and bigger. And I always cite one statistic, which is very important that all Americans should know. The size of the retail goods market in China in 2009, about 11 years ago, was 1.8 trillion, when the United States retail goods market was 4 trillion, more than double that of China. But by 2019, 10 years later, China's retail goods market at 6 trillion was bigger than the United States retail goods market. So it makes sense for American businessmen to now go back and lobby the American government and say, hey, let's not give up on the biggest market in the world, which is China. So you see there is a danger in all the problems that are happening in America for China, but there are also opportunities. And I would say for China should give the Biden administration 6 months to settle down and just keep things as quiet as possible, to allow the Biden administration to work out what would hopefully be a sensible and constructive long-term policy towards China in the first 6 months.
But I still want to ask, regarding what happened at the Capitol and the uncertain process we're still seeing before the inauguration, what's going to happen to a president that has been there for 4 years, pretty much of a controversy for both his own country and the rest of the world? And also, how is the U.S. political system likely to be readjusted and reset for some of the earlier mistakes that we have all witnessed?
When you ask about what's going to happen to President Trump, the answer is nobody knows. Because, you know, I can tell you that when President Joe Biden assumes office on January 20th, he will be very torn, very, very torn between, on the one hand, in a sense, maybe applying the rule of law and saying that President Trump broke some major laws and prosecute President Trump. But if he goes for prosecuting of Donald Trump, the country will become more divided. There's still 74 million people who voted for Donald Trump. So he's got to decide. It's a very, very tough balance. And the best analogy of this is what happened after Watergate. And you know, Watergate was a big scandal in American history. And of course, his President Richard Nixon's successor, Gerald Ford, could have gone to prosecute Richard Nixon, but he wisely decided to pardon Richard Nixon and close the chapter on that, because you know a prosecution would have been a very divisive move. But of course, that can only happen if President Trump decides to take a back seat and be quiet. But if President Trump launches a new political attack on the Biden administration, which is very, very possible, and if he launches a very, very strong attack, starts new social media agencies, talks at rallies, and makes the country even more angry, then he will leave Biden with no choice but to go after President Donald Trump.
Professor Mahbubani, if you were there to give advice to various governments officials from different countries, what would you say? What would you suggest? What is their best bet to deal with the lowest level of unpredictability?
In this, especially one word that neither you nor I have mentioned, by the way, which is very, very critical, it is going to be the key word for 2021, this year now, is still COVID-19, right? COVID-19 is, as you know, hitting Europe so badly, and also hitting the United States very badly. And if you had a sensible Biden administration, the sensible Biden administration would say, hey, let's stop everything else. Let's pause and just fight COVID-19. And frankly, what you should do, you should have a G20 meeting sometime in the near future, where like after the 2008-2009 financial crisis, just like the G20 meeting in London in 2009 under the chairmanship of Gordon Brown, saved the world from the 2008-2009 financial crisis. What we need in 2021 is a good G20 meeting where the whole world, especially China and the US, come together and cooperate against COVID-19. So, you and I have not mentioned this word, but this is the most critical challenge that the world faces in the first 6 months of 2021.
Yeah. Professor Kishore Mahbubani, Distinguished Fellow from the Asia Research Institute of National University of Singapore. Sir, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. My earlier conversation with Kishore Mahbubani about what is happening in the U.S. and what it means for all of us. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching and bye for now.